Hello YouTube, I'm back with the next BattleBots review, and today we're reviewing episode 9, which involves Speed Orbiting Force versus Blade Runner, Hazard versus Turtle Roadkill, and Ronin versus Ginsu. Probably not the most exciting fights in general at this point, even though we're getting to that point where we should be starting to see the better, more skilled robots. The better designed robots at least. But, Blade Runner versus Speed Orbiting Force at least proved to be at least a relatively close match. And if you look at the background, this is something I didn't even notice either. The arena hazards, I guess the kill saws, are actually emitting smoke. So the motor, I guess, that's powering them is burning. They must have fried the motor at some point during the match. Either before the match or it may have been not doing well as a whole. But it ended up going in favor of Speed Orbiting Force. I think mostly this Blade Runner was more or less being controlled to an extent. Although it was still trying to attack. But I mean, it's hard to attack something. It's basically just a bunch of it's basically a giant goalpost. And this was the same team that made Mecha Tanumushi as well. It wasn't a bad idea. It was, I guess, in some ways, a precursor to SLB in Season 5. It had a giant saw as well. So it wasn't just there to get a hold of them, just kind of corral them, bring them to the wall, and bring down the saws. Also, I'd say without a doubt, probably inspiration for Saw Blades and Scorpios, who very similar, although they get underneath instead of, scooping them up, instead of kind of corralling them. I mean, it's a lot harder to do nowadays than it would have been back then. But it wasn't too bad of a fight. I mean, it was relatively close, as I said, but could have gone either way. I mean, I think it was like 6-3 was the decision. Probably should more like 5-4, but I don't know. Either way, it's too bad. I think it had Hazard versus Turtle Roadkill, which is a lot more one-sided. I mean, despite the fact that Hazard lost its weapon, it was still in control pretty much from the get-go. I mean, Turtle Roadkill scored absolutely no points whatsoever. Although I think it may have gotten maybe one aggression point that took out Hazard's blade. Maybe a little bit of damage as well. I mean, Hazard's blade was out after that. It did not start back up, but it didn't really matter. Hazard had the lower wedge as a whole. Turtle Roadkill, I guess, was at least arguably somewhat decently designed. It didn't die after that one hit. It actually kept going. It was at least... I mean, it's hard to be aggressive when your bot's wedge isn't low enough. And Turtle Roadkill is basically made of wedges all around. It's basically a hexagonal shaped robot. I think it was Gus Sire, I think, that built that one. That was a middleweight robot, so... Ends up becoming Turtle in much later on, with a different owner, but it ended up being a lot more one-sided. And of course, Hazard was my favorite back then. I think that may have been among the first fights I saw on TV, so it was probably a little bit more. It wasn't the Hazard we would let it get, but it was at least a step in the right direction. Hazard kind of became notable for kind of breaking its weapon about every fight or so, every other fight at least. But, it was, it's hard to really give, Turtle Roadkill, it's easy to kind of give Turtle Roadkill flack. Okay, it didn't do anything, didn't score any points, but sometimes you just don't have the design that takes it on. I mean, it had at least a good design. It just didn't have the right opponent to face it. And Hazard basically did some pretty heavy damage. They actually had a gash on the side. They actually cut through it. That's what caused the blade to stop working. And that was a pretty lopsided fight in general, but it wasn't a bad fight. I mean, you got to see rather one-sided versus a fight that went in basically a little closer, a little 5, almost probably would have been maybe a split decision. Of course, unfortunately, then you got Ronin versus Ginsu, which I think was probably the least exciting of the 3 fights. Although in some ways it was a bit more one-sided, mostly because Ginsu was losing saw blades the entire fight. Some of them you don't see until they show the replays. I mean, there's definitely at least 1 or 2 that I didn't see had come off. And Ginsu at this point was pretty fragile. It was a very wide-bodied design. The chains were coming off. They were not really able to... And of course, you got saw blades for wheels. You don't have a whole lot of traction. And Ronin was kind of able to sort of breeze through this. I mean, they didn't have to do very much at all. And Ginsu basically drove itself on the spike strips at one point. Gets off, but what difference does it make? They've pretty much lost the fight by this point. They basically had no way of winning this fight. Now, Ronin didn't exactly have the weaponry to actually, cause significant damage back then, but didn't need it for this fight. And although they were still respective, Pierre Abramson, the builder of Ronin, was respected the design of Ginsu and those saw blades, so they actually added protection here. They actually had little spikes around the edges to kind of protect themselves. And I think in some ways this may have been reused in the previous tournament in Las Vegas. Whichever one they competed in last, because I seem to recall they may have had them before then. But either way, I guess it was okay if you liked, seeing a bot that was pretty poorly designed get destroyed, in a sense. It wasn't like you didn't see any shrapnel flying, you just saw the saw blades come off. They were coming out of the axles and everything like that. But yeah, I think by this point, Ginsu was actually modular, so they could actually change the configuration. Unfortunately, I think they chose the wrong one for this fight. They probably should have, in some ways, gone with the one that they had previously gone in Las Vegas 99, where it was sort of a triangular shape. Because then it would stay upright every time. Now, granted, yes, they did lose. They got on their side. But that's like the only way you got to beat it. It's pretty difficult to beat otherwise. In this configuration, yeah, it stayed upright. It was very wide body, so Ronin was not going to be able to flip it. But at the same time, it didn't help. They were coming apart, like basically almost every hit that Ronin got into it. They lost at least 2-3 saw blades by the end of that fight. So they really didn't have much of a chance, almost initially. And in fact, you could see, even before they started the fight, the body was not really capable of handling that much weight. It was actually flexed in the middle. It was actually kind of slumped down in the middle, almost caving in to the fact that there's just so much weight being applied that probably shouldn't have been there. Probably should have been a lot more. They get better. They definitely get better. Season 2, they definitely improve. Pretty drastically. They kind of sort of go back to the old design. But for now, Ronin takes an pretty easy win. They get to the semis, which I think is probably the best performance they'd ever had. Although they made it on TV at least a couple times. But they weren't really that great of a robot in general. So that's my review on BattleBots Season 1.0, Episode 9. Thanks for watching.